Hello everyone and welcome to Azam Sharp Weekly. And in this video, we'll be learning about GraphQL and how we can use GraphQL with SwiftUI application. Now, before I begin, I would like to point out that my video that I'm about to record, I have used Brian Edwin's really good tutorial as a reference. So I would even say that 50% of the code I have taken from Brian. I would definitely encourage you to check out Brian Edwin's channel on YouTube. It's a great channel and he creates some amazing tutorials. And this tutorial really helped me get started with GraphQL. So I'm going to make it a little bit different in the end, but most of the stuff in the beginning is exactly the same as Brian is showing in his video. All right, so definitely check out Brian's channel. Okay, so what we're trying to do is we're trying to use GraphQL in our SwiftUI application. And we're going to use countries API. And you can visit this countries API at countries.trevorblades.com. You can check out the docs or the schema to basically see what is available. All right. So if I go ahead and query countries, and this is basically we're writing GraphQL. So if I need something, I'm just going to write a query, the one that I'm writing right now, and I'm going to post it to this GraphQL API, and it is going to give me the result. So it's pretty cool that you only have one URL, and you're posting it to that URL, your query, and depending on what you're asking in the query, it is going to return you some sort of a result. I guess now, at this point, the question might be that, well, how do you know that there's a name in the countries, array or countries collection? So that is where you will go into the docs. So you can see countries over here, and each country can have a name, native, food, continent. So I can type whatever I want over here. I can go ahead and say capital if I want capital. If I go ahead and want emoji, it can return me the emoji of the country, which is basically the flag of the country. If I want the code of the country, I'll say code of the country, and so on. So now if I go ahead and play, you can see that the data being returned, this is the right-hand side, this is basically the result that we're getting, is in the form of JSON, and it is returning me all the countries with their code, name, capital, and emoji. So that's all related to GraphQL. Whatever query that you're going to write, the result in JSON, what you're going to get will be based on what you're trying to select or what you're trying to say over here. Now, one of the good things that you can do with GraphQL is say get all countries. Basically, we're just providing some sort of a name to our query so that if there is an error in our code and if this query is not working, then we can immediately say that, okay, the get all countries query is not really working. So we can, investigate further on. Okay, so this is fine. This is GraphQL. And this is the data that it returns, which is right here. So the question now is, well, okay, how do I integrate my SwiftUI application with GraphQL so I can display all of these countries? So let's go ahead and get started. We have this basic SwiftUI application with no code written, nothing. The first thing we need to do is we need to make sure that we are adding the package for Apollo framework. Now, Apollo is basically a client a library that can be used with iOS applications, and it will allow you to communicate with GraphQL. Now, how do we install Apollo? Let's go to installation, and this is basically the Apollo website. If you go to installation, if you scroll down, you'll find that there are multiple ways of installing Apollo framework for iOS. You can use Swift Package Manager, CocoaPods, or Cartridge. I'm just going to use Swift Package Manager because it's much easier to use. And I'm going to go ahead and copy this URL. Now, we need to go back to our SwiftUI application and add this package using this URL as a Swift package. So let's go to File, Swift Packages, add a package dependency, put in the URL, make sure that it is URL. So I'm removing those round brackets. Let's go to Next. You will select a version, which is perfectly fine. And now you're going to select, well, which products, targets that you want to add. Make sure that you add Apollo. Don't add Apollo Dynamic if you're adding Apollo. So Apollo is fine. And you can add everything else if you want. All right. Now, we're not really going to do anything with SQL socket or WebSockets, but if you want, you can add those things. And let's go ahead and do finish. So now you can see that now we have added the Swift packages. All right. Okay. So this was the first step. Great. We are able to add Swift, all the different packages for Apollo. This means that we can actually now start using. Well, there are a couple of other things that we have to do. So after that, if you scroll down, the next thing we need to do is we need to download the schema file. Now, what exactly is a schema file? If you go to the playground for countries.trevorblades.com, the schema basically represents what will be the different types available in this GraphQL schema, basically, right? I mean, you can do country or continent and continent filter. You have language. So all the different types. What is a schema of the API that you're using? That is called the schema file. Now we can go ahead and download the file over here also if you want, or we can run a tool which is the Apollo CLI, and we can use that to download the schema by means of a terminal. So you have multiple choices. All right. So how do we do that? Well, let's go back to our code. So we're going to make sure that we are in the correct folder. So I'm going to go into this folder. You can see that right now I'm in the folder called Hello GraphQL. And let's go to Hello folder. Okay, so I'm currently inside my actual project folder. And now I can go ahead and download the schema file. And the URL is basically, or the endpoint, is the https countries.trevorblades.com. The file will be called schema.json. You may need to install Apollo CLI, which you can do it using Brew. So make sure that you install Apollo CLI. If you don't have Apollo CLI, then it's going to complain that where is this Apollo command coming from? So make sure that you install Apollo CLI first. And now let's go ahead and run it. Okay, so it's already downloaded it. Now hopefully I can go back to my project and add it. So I should be able to see schema file right there, and I can add it. Perfect. And look at that. The schema file is basically a JSON file, which contains the schema of the API that we're about to use, which is a countries API. So that is something that you require. That's great. The next thing that we want to do is we want to create the Swift files based on the schema and based on the GraphQL queries that we are writing. All right. So code generation, basically, that's what we are doing, code generation. So based on the queries that we are writing, we want to generate the Swift file so that we can use it in our code. Let's go ahead and add a GraphQL file first. The GraphQL file in your iOS application will consist of all the queries that you're writing. One of the queries that we have writing is this one. So we can literally copy paste this. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to create a new folder. I will call it GraphQL. And inside over here, I'm going to go ahead and create a new file. This file will contain all the different queries. Like give me all the continents, give me all the countries, give me all the states of a country, give me all this, give me all that, and creating and all that stuff. We will name this queries.graphql. Let's go ahead and see over here. You can see the GraphQL file. Now in the GraphQL file, I'm going to go ahead and paste all of this stuff. Basically, this is our small query. Make sure to give a name to the query, which we are doing over here. That is required. Okay, so there we go. Get all countries, which is going to give us all the countries. And each country will consist of the code, the name, the capital, and the emoji. Great. Now the question is, okay, this is all fine, but how do we create the actual Swift files automatically code generated based on what is inside our GraphQL file, which is queries? So if you scroll down, there are a couple of different steps you need to do. The first thing we will do is add a new build phase. Now, all of this that I'm showing you, you just have to do it once. So I know it looks like, oh, this is a lot of work, but you kind of have to do it once. I'm going to go ahead and say hello at GraphQL. Let's go ahead and click on the target. And let's go to build phases. These are the build phases. I'm going to go ahead and add a new run script phase. Let's rename this to generate Apollo GraphQL API and move it above compile sources. The next thing we are going to do is we are going to add some script over here. Now, since we're using Swift Package Manager, I can go ahead and copy this script and go back and paste it. So what this script is actually doing, it is reading your schema, it is reading your, the GraphQL, and it is generating the file called api.swift. Now, by default, the api.swift will be containing in the root folder of your application, but I don't want it in the root. I want it in the GraphQL folder. So I'm just going to change this path so that in the end, when the file is generated, it is inside GraphQL folder. Let's go ahead and save it. Okay, great. And now let's go ahead and try to build it. It's going to take a little bit of time since we're building it kind of like the first time after adding that code generation step. It is going to take a little bit of time, but it's going to be succeeded. Great. Now let's click on the GraphQL and check what files are actually being created. So there's something file called api.swift, which is automatically created. So don't edit this file, don't write code into this file. And this file will contain all of our queries. And you can see that our queries call get all countries, which is actually right here. This is exactly what we typed in. And it has all the code that we need to communicate with or to use the query and to get the result and all the different type information. So don't edit this file. This is only kind of like a one-time deal. Now, if I go into query, or maybe we should call it queries, let's see if we can change this. And go ahead and run it now. Okay, so if we have other query that we have to write, then I can write it in this file. And then if I build it, this file api.swift is going to get updated. And now it will have access to the new stuff that we just wrote in the queries.graphql file. All right, so this is all great. And this is going to allow us to kind of like integrate or set up our SwiftUI application with GraphQL. Now, the other file that I'm going to add will be our custom code. So I'm going to go ahead and add a file called Apollo. You can obviously name this anything you want. And this file will have kind of like a network connection, meaning this is the base service that we're going to use to perform different queries on GraphQL. The first thing I'm going to do is create an instance of network, which we will call shared network. I will also make sure that my initializer is private, so nobody can create instances of network unless they're using the shared. I'm going to also go ahead and create a lazy property over here, which will be of type Apollo client. It's not coming up because we need to import Apollo. So let's go ahead and import Apollo. And the Apollo client will be based on the URL. So let's go ahead and provide the URL, which is based on the string. And let's go ahead and get the URL. countries.trevorblades.com. Perfect. Let's go ahead and build it. And now we are ready to perform a call and get all the countries. All right, so what we should do is go to our content view. Now keep in mind that since we're just getting started with GraphQL, I'm not going to create any kind of a view model pattern. I'm just going to show you how you can make a call right there from your view and get the data and display it. Now, if you're looking for more advanced stuff, which we can cover in the future, but it's always a good idea to create something and make it work, and then you can refactor it. You can create view models or whatever pattern that you want to use. But I'm not going to do any of those things. I'm just going to call it right from the view itself. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start with adding a navigation view. And inside the navigation view, let's go ahead and add a vstack.navigation title. You will see that when you're using GraphQL and Apollo, the Xcode preview works kind of like weird, because every time you actually build the app, it runs those, the step to code generate, which kind of messes up how the previews are being built. So you'll always see like a resume button on the top indicating that you have to resume it. But if you just press the play button, it should just work. All right. So this is fine. What we want to do is on appear. So when the vstack actually appears, we want to make a call. So I can go ahead and probably I can say network.shared.apollo.fetch and pass in the name of the query. If you go to queries.graphql, the name of our query is get all countries. So we can use that. Get all countries. There we go. This is going to give us some sort of a result. We can perform a switch on the result. I mean, switch will have different things. Success. So I'm going to go ahead and say GraphQL result. And we can go ahead and say success for now. And it will obviously have also the second case, which is failure, which is going to be the error. And we can go ahead and print out the error. All right. Okay, so this is fine. But we want to populate list of countries on our screen. So this will give you all the list of countries, but where should we put all of those countries? For now, and as I mentioned earlier on, that we are not using MVVM design pattern. We're just getting started, so it's always a good idea to just get started. I would not recommend this approach of creating state to hold a list of countries. You should use some sort of a pattern like MVVM model, view model, or any other Redux pattern. If you want to use it, that's fine. But since we're just getting started with GraphQL, with SwiftUI, we just want to put the result on the display, on the screen quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and create countries, which will be of type getAllCountries.data.country, and we will initialize it with empty array. Once we get the result, we can go ahead and assign it to countries equals to GraphQL result.data.countries. If I go ahead and run this right now, it's going to say that, well, we need to unwrap this. So let's go ahead and say countries equals to GraphQL result.data.countries. We will unwrap it, and then we can go ahead and assign it. Perfect. Okay. Let's go ahead and build it. Now, it's always a good idea to assign your state on the main queue. So I'm going to go ahead and say dispatch queue.main.async, and we will assign it over here. Perfect. And now we can go inside our list and display countries. The ID, meaning something unique about that, will be, I believe that we have implemented the code also, and the code of a country will be different. So we will use that. Country in, and now we can hopefully display the country. So let's say country dot name. Let's go ahead and build it. Let's resume it. And we need to play it to see that if it works or not. Let's see. There we go. So we got all the countries. Pretty cool, right? We can go ahead and change a little bit of display of the list to say the list style. We can go ahead and say plain list style so that it looks a little bit nicer. Let's go ahead and refresh it. Okay, it looks much nicer. And remember that we fetch also the emoji of a country. And an emoji basically simply means that this is going to be the flag. So we can display the flag of each country easily. Let's go ahead and put this inside a horizontal stack. And I'm just going to go ahead and say country.emoji. Let's refresh our view. There we go. Isn't that great? That's so easy with GraphQL that we were just able to say, kind of like using all of these queries that we're building, we were just able to say that, hey, give me all the countries, and it was able to get all the countries, capital, and name and emoji and whatever, and it was able to get all of those different things. Now, if I want to put something else, I can simply go ahead and say country.capital, country.code, country.something else. So in this tutorial, you learned that how you can set up GraphQL for a SwiftUI iOS application and how you can put all the countries, display all the countries on the screen. In the future tutorial, I will show you something a little bit different, that how we can create a master detail view that you can click on a country and it will take you to a detail screen where you can show additional details about the country. But hopefully this will get you started with GraphQL with SwiftUI. If you like this video and want to support my channel, then the best way would be to check out my courses on Udemy. I just launched a brand new course on core data in iOS. You can see it's already a best-selling course on Udemy for core data. I have also courses on RxSwift, MVVM design patterns, SwiftUI, passive income for developers, and a lot more courses. So I'm sure that you will be able to find any iOS course that you're looking for. And I'm also continuously working on some new courses. The best way to get access to these courses is to check out the link in the YouTube description. And if you use the link, I get to keep a little bit higher revenue. So I will be really grateful if you use the links in the description. Apart from that, thank you so much for your continuous support.